I'm in the car with Atta. He lived here almost like 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you were talking a little bit about the industries and some other big companies like Foxconn, Apple, OEM Apple manufacturer. So tell us a little bit more about how Vietnam economy was 5 years ago, COVID, after COVID, and how do you think the tariff is going to affect everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I relocated to Vietnam because my firm had a logistics investment in the northern Vietnam, in Bac Ninh, which is a very famous area for the FDI, foreign direct investment companies. So there is LG, Foxconn, Samsung. Most of the electronics manufacturing is done in the north because there's a supply chain connection to China as well. And also, it seems that in the south, other industries develop better agricultural, cashew, seafood, and so
Mhm.
forth. In the north, it's pure industrial electronics and most of the exports to the US, let's say.
I heard it's about like 11.3 billion dollar, and then it increased in 1 year almost 25%.
Oh yeah, I mean, because Samsung is a massive manufacturer in Vietnam, I think they export maybe 40-50 billion dollar from Vietnam into the US, so I think, or global markets. So that's a significant one. And also they export a lot of fish from Vietnam to US too. And
Right.
also black pepper and cashew, those are big.
Coffee is big.
Coffee is very big too. They are the second biggest producer in the world, mainly Robusta.
I mean, I think one of the things that makes Vietnam very special, especially for companies from China to come and invest for manufacturing in here, is they have a direct border.
Yes,
So north of Vietnam and south of China, if you guys look at the map, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, these are like huge cities for electronics and component manufacturers in China, mainland China, and basically. Um, those companies, they're bringing the raw materials to Vietnam to do the assembly. One of the reason is the labor cost in Vietnam is a lot cheaper, probably around $300 per
yeah,
month,
300, 350. Yeah.
versus in China 1,000, 1,100, $1,200, and so it's just like so easy to bring products to Hanoi and then assemble there or north of Vietnam. So this way, now like today, we don't really know even like what's gonna happen tomorrow. It's 104% tariff to China versus Vietnam 46%. It's still cheap.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money for Vietnamese economy, but we're gonna explain a little bit more about later how actually the countries in China, countries like China, Vietnam, can avoid the tax. Not to do business only with US, but like options B, C, D. We can talk about that. How do you feel about like the growth in Vietnam, Ata? You used Vietnam like 5 years. You worked in a very big investment companies before. Now you run your own business. Tell us a little bit about how do you think is the economy fragile? Do you think is it strong? How it's going to affect the tariff?
So it is export dependent, that's for sure. I think they export about $300 billion or so. So most of the GDP is actually exports are 100% of GDP. GDP is about 350 billion. So it's very export dependent. It's very FDI dependent, by the way. Most of the exports or
What does
the
that mean, FDI?
foreign direct investment. So like
Okay.
Samsung, LG, Foxconn, Geortex, like all these companies bring most of the revenues and the exports. So Vietnam is heavily dependent on the global economy well. So if you if you that perspective, by the way, you are seeing the barges here in Vietnam, especially in the south. You can see the barge here. Uh, Especially in the south, barging transportation is very big. That's more sustainable, cheaper, and you can carry from Bingzing Industrial, the main ports, through the barges. Um, and on the left side, you can see large, actually, skyscrapers. They did invest a lot in real estate. There was a bubble for a while. I think in Asia, people love real estate as an asset class. But the economy is dependent on import and export, and therefore they will be affected by the tariffs. Having said that, the second biggest export market for Vietnam is China, actually,
Absolutely.
right? So it's not that they only export to US. And also, I don't think US will immediately cut all the imports from Vietnam.
Of course.
It's gonna be a gradual process. I'm still bullish.
You just like start growing coffee just
Yeah,
because you have 46% tariff to
exactly,
Vietnam. Like, California is not gonna like start growing coffee tomorrow. It's
exactly.
not even possible. So there are a lot of products. It's just like I think negotiation power, but I feel it's gonna hurt the export. But actually, today I was reading on the newspaper. I'm gonna show the newspaper to you guys. So if you kind of see like today's like you can see that it's about like a trade war. Like it's just like so not only talk about the trade, tariffs, the trade wars, but also the countries like Vietnam, fast growing country, is actually talking about this. So I think it's going to be a big problem for both, not only for like Asian countries, but also the US. But the plan is actually for a country like Vietnam to start looking at alternative markets, exporting cashew, exporting coffee to China, Australia, UK, European Union. They don't have such a strong tariff. So
They actually
actually,
have now they have a EUVFTA,
Mhm.
European Union Free Trade Agreement.
Mhm.
So most of the items to Europe will be zero tariff rate.
It's
Actually,
very interesting because I think, I mean, they're flexible. So US is limiting every single country with a tariff, but then if you think about it, if you're Vietnam, you have almost 180 other countries that you can export products to. India, Pakistan, Turkey, EU, UK, Australia, New Zealand. So these are like all countries that Vietnam has a huge advantage with the seaport, and they have good relationship with a lot of countries, like politically. So and geographically they have advantage. They have like large seaport, not as large as Chinese ports, but still it's big for supporting the export. It definitely is going to hit in the short term. But another big production in Vietnam is apparel and the footwear.
right?
Companies like Nike, like
Yeah,
Under Armour, they have
it's mostly
factories. They have factories in Vietnam, and then if you got hit by $10 production cost, it will land it to the US like 4.6 additional. A lot of cost increase for those like manufacturers, but how much it's going to actually impact the manufacturer, I don't really think so. Like maybe the quantity is going to go low, but eventually the buyers in the US who's going to get hit by these tariffs.
I agree with that. I mean, if you know anything about infrastructure, factory, and in my previous job, I used to do industrial real estate, ready-built factories, cold storage warehouses. It takes like 2 years to develop it,
Of course.
honestly. So I saw a news today that Apple is thinking about producing more in India, but that will take them, I
Two,
assure
three
you,
years
2 3 years minimum.
minimum, yeah.
And the other part we always talked about in investing in Vietnam, because I was doing investing in Southeast Asia, the Vietnam has a manufacturing culture now. I think China had it as well. Korea, Japan had it. Not every Southeast Asia country has the manufacturing culture.
Right.
Like for instance, in the north, Samsung has a factory. I think it's probably in Tainan. If I'm wrong, correct me. But that's they built a city
Right.
literally. I know this because I was building cold storage facilities, and I think they were consuming maybe 10. They needed 10,000 tons meat capacity because all the factory workers have to eat food every day,
Oh,
right?
that's crazy.
So you're building a whole ecosystem there, food. Like
Years.
manufacturing, cold storage, factory, like it's not gonna happen in 6 months. It will take 2 3 years. And if you know about the let's say licensing procedure, land
But the
procedure,
same thing, like when Trump says, like, "Oh, instead of manufacture those products in China, Vietnam, come to US and
that
do it."
will be hard
It's going to be even like two times more because
exactly.
of the regulations. It's not
Exactly.
going to be that easy to like switch from one day to another day to your manufacturer. So I think, in my opinion, one thing that, especially if you're selling on Amazon, you're a traditional importer B2B, one thing you shouldn't do is panicking. Like, don't panic right now. Things, in my opinion, is going to come down. Countries going to start negotiating. I think one of the biggest issues is going to be between US and China, but they need to come to an agreement to make sure that there's no high inflation. By the way, I'll tell you, used to live in New York.
Yeah.
Now like 6 months in the US, 6 months in Vietnam. But I think we just
Inflation
gonna
is real. I felt it already in the US.
thank you for your time.
Of course, my pleasure.